All right, well, hopefully this will work. So sorry, I was having internet issues. So let's go back over this. For your exam one material, you're gonna have 38 questions and about 2.5 hours to do those questions. So some of the main things that we're gonna be looking at on your test: functions. You need to be able to evaluate, for example, finding f of -3 if I give you the generic function. You need to be able to determine the domain and range of a function. So I can give it to you either as an equation, or I can give it to you as a graph, or both. You might have two different questions. So be sure that you know how to write your domain in interval notation if it asks you to. So if it's an equation, remember there's only certain equations that we've covered so far. Polynomials, so always all real numbers, because you can do anything with a polynomial. You can add, subtract, take it to a power, no big deal. Where there are going to be numbers excluded from your domain is when we have fractions. So notice right here, if you have a rational function, in other words, a fraction, you can use any number as long as that number does not make your denominator 0. You cannot divide by 0. So you have to figure out what those numbers are and exclude them. Okay, so take them out. If you're using interval notations, those will be the points that have parentheses because you cannot use them. If we have a square root, remember, we can take a square root as long as it's 0, because the square root of 0 is 0, or positive. So as long as whatever is underneath, whatever your radicand is, it has to be greater than or equal to 0. And so you can solve for your x, that will be your domain. You also need to be able to look at a graph and tell me whether or not it's a function. Don't forget to use the vertical line test. If it hits the graph more than once with that imaginary vertical line, then it is not a function. Then we also talk about linear functions. That's the y equals mx plus b. If I give you a linear function with, say, a scenario, you need to be able to tell me what number represents your slope and what does it mean? Can you interpret it? And remember, that m, that slope, is also a rate of change. So it might ask you for a slope, it might ask you for the rate of change, and they will ask you, what does that mean? So interpret it. The b is your y-intercept. That's always your initial value. So whenever you're starting that scenario, whatever that time frame is, 0, you have made no product yet, or the date is 0, or if you're starting in 2000, it would be what the population was in 2000. Okay. So with the linear functions, you need to be able to interpret all of the pieces, including the rate of change. Remember that slope is the change in y over an x. So it's how much that y is increasing or decreasing for every one increase in x. You need to be able to graph the linear functions. You also need to be able to write an equation of a line if it's given. Oh, and about the graphs, I know trying to figure out exactly where, the line's supposed to go or how to graph it. It's going to be multiple choice for all the graphs. So you just have to look to see which one matches. You need to be able to write an equation of a line. If I give you a scenario, like, I don't know, in month 3, I made $600. In month 7, I made $2,000. What's the, what would be the line that would represent that increase or decrease in my salary? Or I can just give you 2 generic points. So between those two here, scenario and the 2 points, basically the scenario needs to give you those 2 points. Or I could just give you 2 points. You'll have to find the slope and then write the equation, or I might just give you 1 point and just go ahead and give you the slope, or a combination of all 3. You also need to be able to solve a system of equations. That's when you have 2 equations and you try to figure out what's the point they have in common. Now, I will tell you this, I have one of those questions on there, and the one that I chose, it says to use graphing to solve it. I don't care if you graph or not. You can use whatever method you want. You can use substitution, elimination, or you can graph it if you wish. Also, if I give you a system of equations, you need to be able to determine how many solutions it will produce. All of these systems will be linear, so your only choices are there's no solutions, meaning they're parallel. The lines are parallel, they have the same slope. One solution, meaning they're completely different lines, so they cross at a point, or that they're really two lines on top of each other. They share the same space, therefore they have infinite points in common, therefore infinite solutions. I think that was something that I tried to erase, and I didn't erase all of it there. This next one here, find and interpret an average rate of change given a function and like an interval. In other words, if I give you a function and I say find the average rate of change between x equals -3 and x equals 7. Again, average rate of change is slope, which means you need 2 points. I'm giving you 2 x values. So you first have to plug it in to find their y values, and then it's like going back up to here, 2 points, you have to first find your slope. So find the slope and interpret that average rate of change. We're also going to do the linear regression, which is the line of best fit. So I can give you a table, and then you could put it either in your calculator or in Excel or in Desmos. Those steps aren't necessarily anything that I'd expect you to have memorized. Just know that you have the means to do it. So, if you know one of these is on the test, be sure that you have those notes handy of how to put it in your calculator or Excel or Desmos. Okay. Be able to solve linear inequalities, which means you're going to be using probably interval notation. Be able to graph the solution on a number line. So be able to shade in, or at least choose where the shading is on a number line, whether you're using parentheses or brackets. And the inequalities, I'm going to give you both single inequalities where there's just one, less than or greater than. You also need to be able to solve compound inequalities. And I'll give you an example here, because sometimes the word doesn't, click as to what it is. It's when you have like an inequality in between two, or you might have, it has to satisfy this and this, solve both, if it's an or an and, to determine if you're going to have one interval or 2 intervals. Okay, so you got to be able to solve linear inequalities. Remember that the big piece here, inequalities, you solve them just like equations, except if you multiply or divide by a negative number, don't forget to switch the inequality. That's where a lot of people lose points. Okay, so just take your time. You may be asked to find zeros of an equation. Remember, zeros is just the x coordinate of the x-intercept. So if they give you a graph and they say, what are the zeros? You just look at the x-intercepts and go, okay, I have a 0 of 3 and a 0 of 7, or whatever the case may be. Then remember, in this class, we also had a lot of business, since this is kind of a prerequisite to business calculus. We had a lot of business vocabulary. So marginal was one. So remember, it could be marginal cost, marginal revenue, marginal profit. And basically that marginal is your slope. So as of right now, the only way to find that is if it's linear or if they give you 2 points. Okay, so marginal is your slope. So you have to interpret that marginal value. Now, it's not necessarily interpreted exactly like a rate of change. Remember, marginal is if you're already at a production level of, let's say, 200. We're already making 200 bicycles. The marginal cost would be, all right, so how much would it cost us to make the 201st bicycle? So you're already at a production level, F of 200, but whatever your slope is, that's how much it's going to cost for the 201st. So it's for the next, if you added 1 onto the assembly line, okay? That's your marginal. You need to know what a break-even point is and how to find it. Break-even basically means you have no profit, you have no loss. Your profit is 0. And how do you find that? Your revenue equals your cost, right? The money coming in is equal to the money going out. There's no more, there's no less. Profit itself is your revenue minus your cost, the money coming in minus the money going out. When you are subtracting two functions, don't forget to put the second function in parentheses and distribute that minus or that negative sign. And they also have a question on there. It's like determine either the max profit or the minimum revenue, or sorry, minimum cost or something like that. And it's not going to be a linear function. So if you have other algebraic methods of finding it, that's fine. They don't tell you to graph it, but you can. For us, for right now, until we get into a little more complicated functions, usually the best ways to determine the maximum min are either to plug in your options, see who gives you the most, or graph it and just kind of see where that top value would be. All right, I know that seems like a lot. Do the ones you know how to do first, okay? And I'm gonna post this PDF here as well, so you'll have it. All right. Good luck, guys. If you have any questions, remember, put them up in the discussion board. Just don't put any of the test questions in the discussion board, because remember, not everybody's taking it at the same time. All right. Good luck. Proud of you guys. Bye.